In the year 64 AD, a massive fire tore through the heart of ancient Rome. For 6 days, flames and smoke filled the sky over the capital of the Roman Empire, consuming everything in their path, destroying temples, homes, and marketplaces. Welcome to my channel. It's me. You see, Dio had a bit of a thing for attributing every positive event in Roman history to divine providence, even though Rome was officially a state religion during the rule of Augustus, which were actually shut off at the time due to construction work. Suetonius writes that Nero felt no concern for the people suffering in the flames, and was only afraid that the fire might spread to his own palace. Then, after ordering the release of certain slaves whose labor he required for the building project, he allegedly unleashed poisonous snakes into the audience at the gladiatorial games. So what did Nero do during the fire? That's where our story gets a little complicated, and let's jump into the fire. Every other account of Nero's behavior during the fire comes from Pliny the Younger, and none of them say anything negative about him. And on the 6th day, Nero toured the city once again and decided to convert the nearby farmland into a lake to supply water to the firefighters. But it was too late. By the time they used all that water to battle the blaze, the fire was completely out. It covered 300 acres, the equivalent of 130 American football fields. One section of the palace alone measured half a mile in length, and within its walls were vineyards, artificial lakes, statues, libraries, a stadium, a theater, gardens, temples, shops, a zoo, fountains, chariots, and even a small town, complete with streets, buildings, and public services. It was also an illegal religion, and because Christians refused to participate in Roman religious activities, when he encountered those who wouldn't confess, he subjected them to torture, forcing them to burn in oil and molten lead. Any who survived this punishment were crucified. The reason, according to Pliny, was that the Christians stubbornly refused to repent and persist in their hatred of humanity, and often turned down offers to Roman citizenship. They were considered a threat to the social order. His job was to discredit the religion and convince Trajan that it should be suppressed. After accusing Christians of starting the fire, Nero turned the entire city against them, blaming them for the deaths of citizens, the loss of property, and the disruption of trade. He also rejected an offer from the Roman Senate to reimburse the victims of the fire, saying that he wanted to make a fresh start and rebuild the city better than it was before. And so he did. He opened the land to anyone who wanted to build something new. And although the Christians didn't have much political clout, they weren't completely powerless. Well, again, this comes from Suetonius, who claims that Nero started the fire in order to clear land for his golden palace. However, Suetonius also says that Nero waited for the fire to break out on its own, setting his own land on fire to covertly escape the city. But they rejected his offer. On top of that, the fire started in the district of Pami. In fact, historians believe that this letter was a propaganda piece, intended to sway the emperor rather than a factual account of what was happening in Rome. They were outcasts without political power, so they couldn't defend themselves against accusations. Rumors persisted throughout the empire, and stories of his supposed evil deeds were immortalized in the pages of Roman history, effectively tying his name to the destruction of Rome forever. They were easy targets for a leader looking to distract the masses from his own failures. There was even a fake hill called the Tower of the Winds, because it looked like a Greek mountain. And while Nero certainly behaved oddly, he also did some good things to help his people. The charred remains of Rome, smoldered as survivors, began the long process of picking up the pieces. He calls Christians a depraved and criminal sect, and attributes all kinds of horrible behaviors to them, even though there is no evidence that any of this was actually happening. But historians agree that he seized the opportunity created by the fire to get rid of the old city and build his dream palace on top of the ruins. Slaves and servants reportedly worked around the clock to keep it maintained. He also claims that they held meetings in underground chambers, where they made secret pacts with the devil, but admitted that the only evidence he had for this were a few papyrus fragments containing prayer to the god of the Christians, a god whom Pliny described as a strange one. He even claimed that Christians were casting spells and uttering imprecations against the emperor and his family. Yet he also said that the Christians prayed for the emperor's health, and when one of them was caught stealing fish to eat, he was crucified. Citizens ran in terror from the approaching inferno, while others stayed put, desperately trying to salvage whatever they could. According to a letter written by Pliny the Younger to the Roman emperor, the accusation wasn't the first of its kind. If we read between the lines, it seems that Nero had been looking for someone to blame for the fire, and the Christians seemed like the perfect scapegoats. Instead, he spent the first day putting on athletic displays and chariot races in the circus. Remember, according to one of the things Nero did on the first day of the fire was to order the release of certain slaves that he needed for his building projects. The land that was cleared by the fire gave Nero an idea. Why rebuild Rome when he could build his own personal city on the ashes of the old one? He also ordered that all available water be used to fight the fire, and sent soldiers to guard the countryside, so that people could safely flee there. And that's where the infamous rumor originated. Nero was indeed singing, but he wasn't dancing. nor was he unconcerned with the welfare of his subjects. In fact, it was during this part of the ordeal that he rescued many people by personally carrying them to safety. On the third day, Nero visited the area in person and helped to direct the relief efforts. He then returned to the city on the fourth day with his wife Poppaea Sabina, and the two of them personally distributed food to those who had lost everything. This may seem a little callous, but remember that it was a common form of entertainment during the time. In fact, future emperors would do the same thing when disasters struck. Well, we do not know for sure because most of what we do know comes from sources who are not particularly fond of Nero. Our best primary source is a letter written by the Roman historian Pliny the Younger, who was describing the fire to his friend, the historian According to Pliny, the fire began in the district of Pame on the night of July. He says that it started in a very small way, but spread quickly due to a lack of water and other resources. The fire continued raging for 5 more nights until finally being extinguished. According to Pliny, nearly 10% of Rome was destroyed, including 8 of the 14 wards of the city. Around 40 acres of land were left charred and almost 2 million citizens were left homeless. As the fire raged, rumors spread through the frightened crowds like wildfire. They said that Emperor Nero, instead of lending a hand in calming the masseuse, was seen standing on a private balcony at his country estate just outside the city, dressed in a theatrical costume, playing his lyre and singing about the fall of Troy as Rome collapsed around him. Was it true? Did Nero really sing and dance as the capital burned? Or was that a rumor meant to slander the emperor? Historians are still debating this question centuries later. But one thing is for sure, this fire would forever tie Nero's name to the destruction of Rome. Hello everyone. So what exactly happened in Rome in the summer of 64 AD? In another account, Cassius Dio says that the fire lasted for 6 days, and that only the intervention of divine powers stopped it from spreading any further. In any case, while the cause of the fire is unknown, both Pliny and Dio attribute its rapid spread to the extreme heat of the summer and the lack of water in the aqueduct. According to Suetonius in his biography of Nero, the young emperor received word of the fire early on and spent the first day viewing it from a distance. According to a different account by the philosopher and rhetorician Pliny the Younger, Nero didn't release the snakes. On the second day of the fire, Nero rode around the city with a group of freedmen and senators, giving money to people so that they could escape the city. It was during this time that people spotted Nero in his gardens, singing and playing the lyre. What's interesting is that no ancient author mentions Nero singing or playing the lyre in the gardens, except for a single line in the 15th book of Suetonius's biography. However, despite all these heroic efforts, the fire continued to rage out of control, and Nero wasted no time in seizing the opportunity to seize the land. Over the next several years, Nero undertook one of the largest construction projects in the history of Rome, building his famous Domus Aurea, or Golden Palace. But it wasn't all fun and games in Nero's new palace. Okay, so how did Nero go from hero to villain? You see, Christianity was a relatively new religion at the time, and the followers of Christ were few and far between. Pliny wrote that some Christians confessed to being Christians when confronted, and some denied it even to the point of death. What's interesting here is that throughout this letter, Pliny presents a distorted image of Christianity. For example, Pliny claimed that Christians were engaging in orgies and feasting on human flesh. Yet elsewhere in the text he talks about Christians who refused food and drink for 3 days straight. So why was Pliny writing such a biased letter? Well, he was writing to his boss, the Emperor Trajan, who had asked him to investigate the spread of Christianity. That being said, Pliny did play a role in the persecution of Christians, along with the emperor's wife, Poppaea. According to Cassius Dio, their leaders appealed to the emperor to protect them, but he ignored them. According to the ancient historian Arrian, Nero even offered the Senate the use of the Golden House, if they would allow him to rebuild the city wherever he wanted. Still, the damage done to Rome during the fire couldn't be undone, and in the end, the Christians suffered greatly under Nero's persecution. But wait, what about the rumor that Nero set the fire on purpose? If that's true, it doesn't exactly scream arson. The thing is, we have no idea what's true and what isn't. We can't know what Nero was thinking. As for the fire itself, well, we don't know what started it or why it spread so fast. Unfortunately, for Nero though, the truth didn't matter. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and join me next time for more.